If you're like me, you love web cameras or you love content creating, well, look no further than this camera right here. This is actually the OBSBOT Tiny SE. That's right. The OBSBOT Tiny SE is their current creation. It's a 1080p web camera that does 100 frames per second. Now, inside this packaging, you're going to get, of course, a USB-A to USB-C dongle. You're also going to get a USB-C to USB-C cable. This is going to be your connector cable. Make sure to use the cable included unless you have a high-powered cable that you already use. Now, you're going to get the camera. It's a beautiful little tiny piece of technology that's AI-powered. Now, you're going to notice that it is, of course, a 1080p variation because it has just a plain black front. If it was, of course, a 4K resolution, it would have a red ring all the way around it. Now, this does do pan, tilt, and zoom, and it does rotate all the way around, so you get that nice 360-degree field of view when in action, which is great. Now, it's a 1.28 CMOS sensor that's going to do well. It is, of course, AI technology with an API that's going to allow you to connect up to like your stream decks and stuff, which is great. Aperture is 1.8, so if you guys need that, a 1.8 aperture, it's got it. Dual native ISO built in, and of course, 2.9 million megapixel size, which is great with this. Now, you guys can use it for tons of different variations and usages, of course, with that. It's got a full app control, and it also, of course, has gesture type usage. Built on monitor mount, just right here, guys, built on just like that. You got a tripod connector too as well. What we're going to do is we're going to connect it up. We're going to show you guys the software. We're also going to show you guys it in action. So if you give me a second, let me switch views. Okay, now that we have it hooked up, you guys can see that's the actual camera we're using right now, and you guys will see the software to the side. Now, that is the OBSBOT Center software that can run all of their cameras, but we're just using the Tiny SE today for this variation. Now, first we're going to have zone tracking if we want to do zone tracking, or I can do normal tracking, which means if I move around, the camera's going to follow me and go wherever I go. Now, the cool part is if I do gesture controls, I can actually zoom on in, do it again, it will zoom on out. And if I move back, you guys can see how smooth the camera moves with me. Now, it's 1080p at 100 frames per second, which is great. That is normal tracking. I can do upper body tracking. I can do close-up tracking. I can do headless mode if I really want to. Standard tracking, or even lower body. Now, we do have AI mode, which is going to be like hand control, group controls. Down below, we have the gimbal. The gimbal is going to allow us to, of course, move the camera to whatever position we want. And then if we want to zoom on in, let's say we're going to zoom right here. And I can add this as preset 1 for position 1. Now we'll move over here and say, let's do this. And of course, we'll take off the tracking. And we're going to move all the way over. And then we're going to zoom in back there because we can go 4 times zoom. We're going to zoom on there. We're going to zoom on there, and then we're going to just preset that to that. So when I go back and forth, I can preset these to whatever I want and what I want to view on, which is amazing. Now, we don't have to just do presets, guys. We can do wide angle. We can do narrow. We can even do narrower, or we can reset it all. Now, it gets even better because we have image controls, autofocus, auto exposures, white balance, 50 hertz, 60 hertz. You guys pick and choose what you want. Auto white balance, of course, contrast, saturation, sharpness, and hues. If your colors and you don't think they're perfectly set, change it and pop it around. Now, when you're over here in the more section, you're going to have, of course, device initialization state, where you can put device into sleep, auto sleep, and we can actually change the image of the device when it sleeps or add our own. Gesture control targets we can turn on and off, or we can do dynamic zoom in and out with, of course, the dual hands. We can even do directional flip, and that's going to just, flip like the images and everything was as well. We can mirror the image. So let's say I didn't like the way the image was. You guys couldn't read my hat. I would just flip it, and you guys would have, of course, that indication. We do have firmware updates and manual updates as well, and it gets more in depth than just that, right? Because we have beautification section, and this beautification section's going to allow us to do, of course, native lookup tones on the skins. We can change out the tones, and it's going to let me do this. We can even custom make it if we want to do customizations with this. Now, there are also filters preset in there. You're going to have 4 or 5 presets that we can use with this, or we can even blur out the background image. So if we want to blur out the background, guys, we just, of course, pop this on, and we start adjusting the blur, and it will allow us to blur out whatever is, of course, in the background and all of that. Now, because I'm actually live, it's not going to let me set up the blur just yet, which isn't a big deal. Full on control, very easily simplified. Guys, the OBSBOT Tiny SE may be the one you've been looking for.